where we discuss the business of cybersecurity. Here are your co-hosts and cybersecurity experts, Brian Horning, Reginald Andre, and Randy Bryan.
I don't even know what happened there. Did that come through?
I can hear you. Oh, wait, I thought for a second Andre was locked up. Yeah, I heard it all. I heard the intro.
No, I didn't. I'm locked up. I was locking up or something. Maybe it's me with the internet problems.
Well, they were cheering when they started cheering once again. They always cheer when we mention Andre's name. So the fan favorite.
There you go.
Yeah. Welcome to another edition of the Security Squawk podcast. I am one of your co-hosts, Brian Horning from Exact Cybersecurity and IT. And we also have Randy Bryan joining us after a 1-week hiatus from Tech Rescue.
Feels like a million years.
Reginald Andre down in Miami for Arc Solvers, Cybersecurity and IT. Yeah. And this is the show where we try to educate everybody about what the hell's going on out there around cybersecurity and an quickly evolving, ever-changing industry that we work in, boots on the ground, giving the rest of the world kind of education and knowledge on what we're seeing and where we think the world is going when it comes to just dealing with all the stuff that we have to deal with when it comes to cybercrime, cyber criminals, and ransomware. So if you enjoy anything or you learn anything on our show, whether you listen to us or watch us on social media, which we're going to be streaming here on very shortly, you're going to see us on YouTube, Facebook. Where else are we at? LinkedIn. Share us out. Share us out to your friends, and the more you share it or the more you like our post, the better chance that other people in your community on your friends list will see our stuff, and that really helps us out and it helps us spread the word, and it's why we do this show on a weekly basis. I think we've been doing this for like over 2 years now, right? Have we hit the 2-year mark, Andre?
Yeah, definitely at least at minimum 2 years.
Yeah, so lots of things changing. One of the things that we kind of warn everyone about, I guess maybe for like the last 6 months or so, is that the days of you being allowed to do nothing or choose what you want to do around cybersecurity are coming to an end. And we all say here that the government's going to create rules, they're going to put laws on the books that are going to impact businesses and force them to do this stuff the right way, because quite frankly, as we point out on the show all the time, we know they're not. And here we have the SEC coming out with their revised cybersecurity rules, which are pretty stringent, and they require businesses to do a lot of things, and it has global implications as well. So let's kind of dive into it with our audience. I guess first off, the SEC doesn't cover everybody, so let's talk about who they cover, who has to be worried about the SEC potentially coming after them if they don't do cybersecurity the right way. And then let's talk about what the SEC wants companies to do who may be under the purview of the SEC. So first off, I know, obviously, if you're publicly traded, that's obvious. You have to deal with the SEC. But you also, if you deal with investments in any way, shape, or form, so you think what they call family offices in financial planning, or private equity or M&A, right? Those are all covered by all of this. So if you do investing, whether you invest in stocks or whether you invest in businesses like private equity and M&A do, you have to follow these rules now. And while the rules with the SEC have been fairly, I would say, more mature than most industries, this really starts to get interesting here for people, because you have basically 4 months to get on the ball here and do what they're asking you to do, because the new rules go into effect in December of 2023. And I also want to say that the SEC isn't like the FTC. They're not going to like extend this and kick the can down the road on this.
Right.
So you're going to have to do it. So let's jump into it. I don't, one of you guys want to take kind of like one thing that stood out to you that companies are going to have to do?
Yeah, sure. I'll go first. So here in the article, it talked about 4 things that they're going to have to do in following a breach-related information attack. So we have the date of the discovery and the status of the incident, the concise description of the incident's nature and extent, any data that may have been compromised, altered, accessed, or used without authorization, and the impact on the incident of the company's operation. So I love what I'm reading here. Just as an investor, taking out the cybersecurity hat, if I'm looking to invest in a company and there's some internal data breaches that's happening, and now I, put some money into the market, and 2 days later I find out, wow, something happened 2-3 months ago. I wish I would have known. So I think that's going to be great for the investor, first off.
Yeah, and the thing that really stands out to me on this is this is really, like, we talk about this all the time in our show, and we've talked about all these different things that went to trial, and people are like, oh, I don't know, the IT person didn't tell me, or, I wasn't in charge of that. And this brings in, like we're hearing over and over and over, brings in accountabilities that are literally the result of like lawsuits and things that happen where people disavowed accountability, where now they're going to be held accountable because of basically everybody sticking their head in the sand over the past many, many years. That really stood out because of the whole transparency thing, and that the boards have to have a certain amount of play. It literally says that the cybersecurity expertise of management and board members and descriptions of policies and procedures for the identification and management of cyber risks have to be included. So that really hit me when I read this.
So not only do you have 4 days to kind of report on the breach, and as Andre mentioned, the extent of, I thought some of the interesting things just in that alone were, you can't just say we got hit with a cyber attack anymore. You have to say what it was. And you have to start the information sharing almost at that 4-day mark, right? And the days of companies just not letting you know what's going on and just putting out these kind of like, hey, I think there were times, guys, that over the years that we've been doing the show and we've talked about various attacks, when we've seen network incidents used, when there's been ransomware events, when companies are dealing with ransomware events. So a lot of what the SEC is forcing, and I guess the way I could summarize what the SEC really is trying to do with these rules is, I think for the last couple of years, they've been observing companies not take full ownership of cybersecurity responsibilities. And I saw a report by Krebs maybe like 2 weeks ago that pointed out that, a very small percentage of Fortune 100 companies actually have CISOs on their board, yet they have chief people officers or they have a chief marketing officer. And they're always keeping that CISO or that security person one level down away from the board. So typically they report to maybe operations managers or operations officers, or they'll report to the CIO. They won't make security a kind of like a separate thing from IT. They view it as an IT problem. And I think that's what has come through to the SEC from businesses, is that we're going to treat this as an IT problem. We're going to keep it at arm's length away from the board for very strategic reasons, I believe. And we can kind of debate that and get into that here in a minute. But that's been the play. And the SEC is like, that's no longer going to fly. You need to have cybersecurity experts advising you, letting you know what your threat is. You must receive threat intelligence reports from a qualified cybersecurity person. So they're really just telling CEOs and people who are in charge, the days of you burying your head in the sand on purpose because you just don't want to deal with the problem are over. And I think that a lot of these companies in this industry have known for quite a while now, probably about a year and a half, that this was going to come and this was going to change. And here we are. So anything you want to add to what I just said there? Plus, I want to get your guys' thoughts on what kind of teeth you actually think this is going to have on these businesses.
No, we've seen SEC fine, so we know they have the resources, and I just can't wait till this trickles down to the small businesses or mid-sized businesses.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Right. I was going to ask, how's that going to happen in your opinion?
Which one, the trickle down?
Yeah.
How's the trickle down going to happen? Yeah. State by states. They're going to try to, I would say, copy and paste what the SEC is doing.
And there used to be a saying, what happens in California now happens in the rest of the country like 5 years later. Although I'm not sure that that's still going on, but that we used to say that. But with cybersecurity, you could say what happens in the SEC now is going to happen for everybody else in the next 3 years. Easy. And that's, you look at what they were doing like 10 years ago. Everybody's got to do now to get insurance and stuff like that. I feel like I would basically agree with what Andre's saying. This is going to cause the effect to ripple all through different areas of business that aren't even under the control of the SEC.
Yeah. And it's a legal form that they're going to be submitting. So if they're lying or, have their lawyers do some crafty email, I mean, that's going to be lawsuits later on.
That's not even going to be lawsuits. They won't even be able to be in the financial investment sector. Like, they'll get kicked out. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's what that comes down to. So, I mean, it's one thing that just popped in my head is it's amazing to me that out of everything that is in these rules, the thing that's being talked about the most is the 4-day rule, which I think, quite frankly, is the least part of anybody's worry out of what comes out of this, right? Because the 4-day thing is predicated on you having an attack, right? But the rest of the rules apply to you preventing yourself from having an attack. And that's, to me, where the bigger deal is for companies, because they're actually going to have to start investing in this stuff. And, at the end of the day, they're basically saying that you can't have your IT department in charge of oversight of your cybersecurity program. You now have to be in charge of oversight of the cybersecurity program. So now you can't say, I don't care, it's not my problem anymore. Like, and I guess the other thing that I'm seeing out there is a trend, and you guys can tell me if you're seeing the same. But one of the trends I'm seeing is not coupled with the fact that they're making them take their head out of the sand. I think at the same time, businesses are also waking up to the fact that, yeah, there's a lot of cyber insurance companies out there writing cyber insurance policies for these companies to cover their risk should they have to deal with an event. But there's also a lot of businesses finding out that they bought cyber insurance, and these cyber insurance companies are doing everything they can to not pay these claims. And that's another piece of this. I think there's a massive false sense of security by businesses who are like, hey, we have a cyber insurance policy. I have pet insurance, right? And I guess I have to start telling people, like, cyber insurance is probably just as good as pet insurance, because pet insurance, quite frankly, sucks. If your pet, basically has to break his leg and it has to be like a total accident for them to cover the claim. If my dog had some like thing growing on its skin, and we tried to go through pet insurance to get it paid for the vet bills, and they were like, oh, that's a hereditary condition that breed has and gets that, so we don't cover that. It's a exclusion. Now, they're not doing things like that with cyber insurance. They're just going in and saying, hey, you told us you were doing this and you're not doing it. So now we're not paying your claim. And that's the world we live in.
Yeah. So, a question on that though: the 4-day rule. Are people saying it's not enough days, or it's too much days?
Say that again.
The 4-day rule, because you said there's a lot of people talking about that. So, what's the argument on?
Well,
on
I just think if, like, when I was Googling and I was looking for the SEC rules, most of the headlines were SEC, requires companies to disclose in 4 days, and that was like the big headline that came out of these rules. And I think that's, my point is that's the least of businesses' worries. They have to worry about all the other stuff, right? So, are you asking me to go through all that?
Oh, no. I thought just people were saying that, the 4 days was not enough days for the companies, or it's too much days for them. Like, okay.
No, I'm just saying that I'm surprised that that's like what most of the news outlets pulled out of what was read, right? Is that you have 4 days. It's like, well, there's a whole other slew of rules that have been laid out here that nobody's talking about. So just bringing awareness to that. So let me go back. So ransomware. Found this article.
Before you move on to that next article, I just wanted to add, I like the 4-day thing, because we've seen a pattern. We actually have like a joke, like the cycle, like the first thing out of the gate is nothing to see here, and then they come back later, like when it's on like a holiday weekend or on the weekend, and that's when they really drop the bomb about what really happened. The 4-day thing, once again, it's a reaction to how people have been handling these things. And the 4-day thing means, if it happened on a Wednesday, well, then you better have a press report out or whatever you got to do to fill out the form or whatever. You got to do that in, 4 days. So
that's it. 4 days to disclose it. And, I guess the other thing I want to point out before we move on is, CMMC was adopted yesterday. SEC rules have come out. So you take a look at the Biden plan, that or whatever you want to call it, the White House's cybersecurity plan. There is and I've been trying to tell people there's a wave coming, but this wave is moving now. Like, the government has their eyes set on starting to secure this country from a cybersecurity standpoint. And this is how they're going to do it. And they're going to require companies to start putting language into their contracts for their subcontractors. So that's the other trickle-down effect that kind of Andre mentioned, that I think not only are states going to start doing similar stuff, but anybody that gets paid by the government in any way, shape, or form. Think about when hospitals are built and they get money from HHS, or colleges and universities that get money from the Department of Education. They are all going to be required to do more around cybersecurity. And then the vendors that they use are going to start seeing language in their contracts that require them to do more around cybersecurity, because everybody is being told they have to evaluate third-party risks. So what's an easy way to do that? Just put a blanket statement that says you basically adhere to the same level of cybersecurity as we do. And they're going to make you do it that way. And if you don't do it, you risk losing your revenue for your business. And there will be businesses who decide it's just too much for us to do for this little amount of money that we get for being a subcontract on this thing. That's conversations I have all the time with businesses where we're like, hey, I remember one time that we were reviewing contracts for a customer, and we said to them, hey, do you know how much it is to get a SOC 2? And they were like, no, why? And I'm like, because you have an agreement here with this company that says you will get a SOC 2. And they were like, I think the number that they threw at me was like, we don't even do like $80,000 a year in revenue with that company. We would never try to go get a SOC 2 for that kind of revenue. And I'm like, right, but you you signed an agreement that says you would be SOC 2 compliant, SOC 2 type 2 compliant, and that's going to cost you a minimum of $200,000 over the next 2 to 3 years. So, that they had to make a business decision of whether they wanted to continue to collect that revenue for the requirements that they were put under. Because going back to the client and saying, hey, we have to charge you more if you're going to make us do this, doesn't fly because they already signed the agreement.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Randy.
Well, I was going to say, to add to that, we mentioned in the last several months a bank that was fined. There was no leak and, nothing happened, but they were fined because they didn't properly vet their vendors. I think it was like $100 million fine. And we figured out that was like 0.001 of their, annual revenue. Yesterday, I was talking to a customer. And so for the first time ever now, that I've heard at least, there's now a question on some cybersecurity insurance applications. Do you have a process for vetting your vendors? As far as cybersecurity goes, I don't remember the exact wording, but that's kind of crazy. That's starting to to add to what you're saying. That's even starting to trickle down now into insurance applications. Are you properly vetting your vendors from a cybersecurity standpoint? You can't just stick your head in the sand, which is what everybody's been doing.
And the reason you can't stick your head in the sand is because we are dealing with ransomware at an unprecedented rate, and it's still a huge problem according to CSO Online.
Great transition.
CSO Magazine. So it basically starts off. Ransomware has been a growing plague on businesses for nearly a decade. Wow. And data shows it is increasing. The new research from Sophos finds 76% of ransomware attacks resulted in the criminal successfully encrypting data. That's a pretty good success rate, guys. This is the highest rate of data encryption from ransomware since Sophos began its annual State of the Ransomware report in 2020. So the latest edition of the report debunks the idea that ransomware is holding steady or even declining. Remember that at the end of 2022 that was coming out like crazy. Like people actually thought they were getting ahead of this stuff. In fact, 67% of organizations were hit by ransomware in 2022. This reveals rates of encryption have returned to very high levels after a temporary dip during the pandemic, as crews have refined their methodologies of attack. So let's just kind of talk about that right there. I don't know if you guys have had a chance to review the report that they're citing in here. But I don't think any of us are surprised by any of this data, other than the fact that that's a pretty damn high number. 76% of ransomware attacks resulted in successful encryption of data. So you basically have a 20% chance of it not being successful, which is not great if you're a business. It really it blows my mind that businesses think that they have good cybersecurity when these are the data points that come out. Like you clearly don't. That's
well, and we often talk about the methods that they use to encrypt. And we rarely are we like, whoa, that's really cool and amazing. We're normally like, well, there you go. Another leaked password on the dark web, another VPN account they forgot to close, another developer that walked away from their computer for a few minutes or whatever. And this article backs that up, saying that they really aren't doing that much that's sophisticated. People are just so poorly defended and poorly patched that they're just wide open for this. So basically they're saying it's a target-rich environment.
I don't know where we're getting feedback from, but I'm hearing feedback.
Oof.
So Andre, anything out of this article that you thought was interesting? Or did you look at the report that you thought it was interesting? So
yeah, what I liked about this article, it talks about why you shouldn't pay the ransom, and give some statistics about that. And one of the articles we're going to be talking about is how a community college paid the ransom. So it's like so funny. Like as I'm reading the article, I'm like, okay, yeah, you shouldn't do it. And then here we are. We're going to be talking next about Hawaii's community college paying the ransom.
So let's just hit some of this. I found an infographic on the report. Hopefully everybody can see that. Take a look at some of these numbers that are here. I mean, 97% of organizations that had data encrypted got the data back. So wow. I mean, there they are again, the criminals returning people's data at a rate of 97%. Just goes to show you, I mean, and the hackers want you to see these kinds of statistics because, that's their business models predicated on people believing that if they pay that ransom, they're going to get their data back. Any statistics you guys see there that stick out for you? Randy, you're muted, buddy.
Yeah, sorry, I muted after the whole feedback incident.
Yeah.
But why are they saying 97% of organizations that had data encrypted got data back? What does that mean? Are they trying to say that 3% didn't?
Yeah. Well, they're basically saying that if you pay the ransom, only 3% of organizations don't get their data back.
Right. So, but they are saying, though, if you pay the ransom, your recovery cost, back in the original article, your recovery costs are double if you pay the ransom versus if you use backups to get your data back. But I don't even know that that's a good point to make, because what we're seeing is, what's been out now for like 3 years is double extortion, where, they encrypt your data, but they also release it if you don't pay the ransom either, So, okay. So maybe you're recovering from a backup, but you're still at threat of your data getting released. I know that's not on the infographic, so we can stick with that.
So the average ransom in 2023 was 1.54 million, up from 812,000, and 59% were standalone cyber insurance policy, and 15% were no cyber insurance coverage at all. And then the mean recovery cost is 1.82 million, excluding the ransomware payment. So you basically can add those two numbers together that are in yellow there. 2.6 million if paid the ransom and got the data back. So it costs more if you pay the ransom and get the data back versus if you use backups to restore data, which only costs you 1.6 million for costs of recovery. What do you guys think about those numbers? I think those numbers are way higher than any CEO in this country thinks. I don't care what level they're at. Small, medium, large enterprise business. I think that I don't think CEOs really understand the gravity of that number right there.
Not until it happens.
Well, what's really crazy though is how it goes up if they pay the ransom.
And then let's just look at the rest of it. 84% lost business revenue due to the attack. 84%. So that's going into the 90s there. And 24% took between 1 and 6 months to recover from the attack. And only 45% were able to recover within a week if backups were used. And only 39% were able to recover within a week if they paid the ransom. So most companies don't recover within a week. That's basically what that's telling you. And it's quicker if you have backups versus trying to pay the ransom, which makes sense because you're not you're not negotiating. You're going right to your source for your backups and you're restoring. So I don't know if you guys can hit the comments. Give me a thumbs up or thumbs down if you guys want to try to tackle that question. I don't really understand what it means, so I don't even know anything about that, so I'm not even gonna try to tackle it. So let me know if you want to try to tackle it or not.
Yeah, that's my buddy Bill Honore, but I'm not sure of the question either. If you, Bill, if you can reward it.
Yeah. I'm not a central bank digital currency person, so I have no idea what any of that means. I mean, I do, but I'm not an expert. So
I have a comment on the infographic.
Please.
So backup use has dropped 3% in the last year, and the rate you have almost a 40-ish% savings in overall recovery costs if you have backup. So I see that that's happening. I see that that's very real, but I don't understand why less people would be using backups. That just blows my mind, actually. So
because it's in the cloud. It's in the cloud of backup.
yeah, it is. And like we've always said, the cloud, all you're doing is you're taking your server out of your server closet and you're putting in someone else's server closet. That's all you're doing. So you still need everything you needed before. And are you just going to hope that they're doing it? So anyway, don't get me started on that one.
So I like this one because it kind of brings up a point that we talked about on our last week's episode when we talked to Ken Pyle from Cyber. This is like something Ken does all the time. He finds equipment that's been discarded, thrown out, recycled somewhere, put somewhere. And we need to bring awareness. Like, you know, we say at the top of the show, we want to bring awareness to as many people as we can. And this right here is awareness to basically everybody who has printers in their home or office, which is probably most of America, I would think. Especially if you have a Canon printer, but this really applies to any device that you put into your home, right? It could be as simple as a digital or as an LED light bulb, a smart light bulb, right? Anything where you're basically saying like, here's my Wi-Fi network, here's the user, here's the SSID, here's the password to connect to it. Could be susceptible to what we're seeing here with this Canon warning, which Canon warns of Wi-Fi security risks when discarding inkjet printers. So like I said, I'll leave it to one of you guys to kind of fill everybody in on what's going on here. But I would just, as you listen to us talk about this, just don't say to yourself, well, I don't have a Canon printer, because this can be any device in your home that you connect to Wi-Fi. So go ahead, guys.
So I think we had said Andre was going to lead off on the next article. So I guess I'll lead off on this one. But basically, you have a printer, you hook it up to the Wi-Fi. It's storing the data, the username and password of the Wi-Fi in the printer. Use the printer for a few years. You throw it away, or hopefully you're not throwing it away. Like, you know, there's recycling places where you can send it. If you sold it on like Facebook Marketplace, somebody could get it and basically get the credentials out of it. They could figure out really who you were, because we all know you can get on Shodan and you just look at internal names of networks and you can almost always figure out what business it actually is. Even if that doesn't even have other information, you can just look at the internal network and figure that part out. Because a lot of times, you know, if you're at XYZ company, you know, the Wi-Fi is called XYZ Wi-Fi. You know what I mean? But we saw this happen big time with hackers that were buying old smart switches. They were buying them, getting them into Eastern Europe, and then using that data to get into networks and such. Bottom line is, when you get rid of a piece of equipment, you need to make sure that it's wiped. There are some recycling places that will give certificates of being wiped, but in that previous instance with that switch, that article actually said there were some recycling places don't actually wipe even when they say they do. So you're best off just wiping the device yourself before you get rid of it. That's the bottom line here.
Yeah, and if you have a business copier machine where it's like a hard drive inside and you're scanning to that copier device, When you return it back to maybe you're leasing it, you're going to get a new copier, or if it's dead, make sure that that company also does a wipe. And same thing, certificate of destruction, or you just ask them, what's your procedure? What are you going to do now that you take this hard drive? Or just go in and delete all the information. But just don't.
We bought an off-lease copier once, and it was used at a Wells Fargo.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Yeah. And this was like over 10 years ago. But that happens. Andre's 100% right. You don't think that happens, or you think, hey, when I give it to my copier company, they're going to wipe it for me. Don't assume that they're going to wipe it for you. Before you unplug that thing and give it to them, go format the hard drive on it, right? I remember one time I was, just checking things on my home network, and I was able to access a device that had a storage section on it, and through my network I was able to access this device and see files. So I start clicking around, I see a text file called Wi-Fi, and I open up that file, and there's my fucking SSID and my user and my SSID password right there in plain text on this text file. So obviously I got rid of that device. But these types of things can happen. Like, you can buy a device that you think is cool. It's a smart switch. It's a smart outlet, whatever it is. You program it to be on your Wi-Fi, and it stores a text file in the device that the device reads when it boots up, and it doesn't encrypt it. It keeps everything there in plain text for anyone to see if they can get access to it. So that's kind of what we're talking about here. When you get rid of that device, if that text file is still there and it wasn't wiped, somebody could potentially get their hands on that and then, figure out where you were. Or maybe they know where you are already, and then try to connect to your network and do bad things. If you don't think that this stuff happens, it does. And I guess my biggest thing, what I have been telling people lately, what we do at my home, is smart devices, they get connected to a completely separate Wi-Fi network than what we connect our laptops to do work on and things like that. I just don't trust smart devices anymore. So I set up like a guest network on my Wi-Fi at my house, and all our devices get connected to that, and the computers and the important stuff go on a completely separate network, and everything works just as normal. It takes a little bit more thinking and a little bit more setup to do it the right way, but I feel like we're a lot more secure now because we don't have to have worry about these devices being compromised. Or, if somebody does get on that network, all they're going to see is smart devices. They're not going to be able to get to a computer, or they're not going to be able to, do anything crazy once they get on that network. So that's something I would recommend is, set up a guest network, create a separate SSID with a separate network in your home that you connect these smart devices to. That's the best way to go about it, in my opinion. So,
quick crazy story. About 6 months ago, we had a client. They're going into a new office, and it was actually an old Wells Fargo regional office. So nothing with actually the bank, but it was just an office where corporate would go to. And when they left, they literally ripped every single cable out. And like you would have thought that there was never any hardwired Cat 6, Cat 5 cabling in there. I was like, wow.
Yeah. So moving right along, guys. Our last topic. We'll wrap up here. Andre,
my smart devices are mostly still in shrink wrap. So
what'd you say?
Most of my smart devices are still in shrink wrap. They're not even unboxed. So.
So Andre will fill us in on what's going on out here in Hawaii, but we have another school under attack. Hawaii Community College pays ransomware gang to prevent data leak. What's going on in beautiful Hawaii at the community college there?
Yeah, so we got June 19th of this year. The ransomware group called No Escape had they basically were able to do a ransomware, and they have 65 gigabits of stolen data that they took from this college, and they said, if you don't pay up, we're going to go ahead and leak it. And if you check our track record, we've done it before, so we're going to do it with you. And I know it's going to be debatable, but I'm going to say the college did the right thing. They said that they saw that the information that this ransomware group had personal identifiable information, socials, forms that a college student would fill in, driver license information, all of this stuff of both employees and students. And they said, you know what, let's go ahead and protect our staff. Let's go ahead and protect our students. And I'm sure the lawyer said, and let's protect our pockets, because all of these people are going to come after you in a class action lawsuit. So they went and go ahead and paid it. And apparently, I'm not going to say it's roses again. I'm sure a few heads roll, but it's a community college, so taxpayers pay for it anyways, right?
So it's basically saying that the 65 gigabytes of data, that basically No Escape said that they'll basically have everything decrypted by August 14th. So they have 2 weeks still. And that's kind of lends itself to that data that we saw with the Sophos of how long it takes to get back up. It's going to be obviously longer than a week for these guys. And they're still not going to be fully operational until later this month in this particular incident. So one of the things that crossed my mind as you were talking, Andre, is I'm really surprised. I would assume that this community college probably gets federal funding somewhere along the way. I'm really surprised that they paid the ransom, and I would imagine that they had cyber insurance and they were advised to do so. And I'm surprised that that doesn't jeopardize their ability to get funds from the Department of Education. That they went and paid a ransom. So interesting. And this isn't even one of the most prolific groups right now, which is pretty amazing to me too. I think next week I'd like to spend maybe 15 minutes going through some of the more prolific ransomware groups and who they've hit in the last 2 or 3 months, because there's 3 or 4 of them out there that are just racking up the victims, and I'd like to bring some awareness around it. So try to keep that in the back of our minds for next show. Anything else you guys want to add before we wrap up here?
Yeah, I think I don't know if it's a snoozer, but maybe we should do like a cyber insurance application where we bring out a few empty forms, 2 or 3 pages, and just kind of go over it.
I got one, so we'll pull up the one that I have from last week.
This is slow news day. We'll do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to show people. I think maybe show people what's being asked, and then explain to them what it actually means and what they should be seeing in their environment if they're actually doing those things. Because I mean, I look at it 2 ways. If you don't know and you're guessing, you're either a yes person or a no person. You're either going to put yes on every question, or you're going to put no on every question. Either way, you're wrong. And I think that it'll be eye-opening for a lot of people, because I know a lot of people still tackle those applications on their own, and that just blows my mind. But yeah, that would be a good kind of second part to next week's show, where we talk about ransomware groups and we talk about cyber insurance applications, and how people can screw them up royally, and what it means if you don't fill them out right. Mm-hmm. So, all right, cool. We're 43 minutes in. Good show. Thanks for your input, guys. And we'll see everyone next week. Take care.